My name's Snake. Surveillance camera? Everyone decides their own fate, no matter where they were born. Metal Gear was designed to launch a new type of nuclear warhead, wasn't it? You double-crossed me.
And welcome back to Leo Gaming, guys. So, Metal Gear Solid. What can I say? The sheer mention of that name brings back those happy days of being a young boy inserting the first disc of a 2-disc masterpiece and playing what I can only recall as an interactive film at the time. Watching those cutscenes with wide eyes, not having a clue as to what they were talking about, but just enjoying the visual porn unfolding before me. Well, it was a visual piece of art, and being the age of 11, after playing Crash Bandicoot, Formula 197 and Pandemonium, this was a feast. You see, because of the vast gap of this game between many other great PlayStation 1 titles, I didn't care how long these cutscenes were, I was just in awe. Looking at every detail, every movement, every edge, albeit how jaggedy they were, wondering how was this possible, accompanied with the genius storytelling and elements never before seen in gaming, like changing controller ports with Psycho Mantis, or working out Meryl's codec that was on the CD case itself. This game innovated and pushed forward the gaming industry to new standards and new heights of what's possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me take you on a journey to Shadow Moses Island, back in time for Metal Gear Solid Retro Review.
Elevator to the surface, but make sure nobody sees you. If you need to, contact me by codec. The frequency is 140.85.
Metal Gear Solid is a stealth game developed by Konami, more specifically Hideo Kojima, and was released for PlayStation in 1998. You are Solid Snake, and you have been kidnapped by various government organizations and blackmailed into rescuing 2 hostages on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska. You must defeat Foxhound, a mercenary outfit led by none other than Liquid Snake, your twin brother. Sneak, crawl, shoot, and boss battle your way to disarming the terrorists of launching a nuclear weapon, save the hostages, and defeat your own demons in this epic tactical espionage classic, Metal Gear Solid. Snake! 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 So let's start off with the visuals, guys. The moment this game begins, you can already see the graphical superiority compared to other PS1 games. From the underwater effects to the falling snow around the base, the use of motion blur and particle effects was amazing for the time. They use motion blur just enough and not too much where it becomes annoying, like we see in modern games where they think motion blur and film grain is what everybody wants. Back then, it was used to cover up the slight cracks in the visuals due to the limited capacity of the hardware. Now it's used due to laziness of incomplete, poorly made games. With Metal Gear Solid, you play mostly in a snowy landscape, which looks beautiful. You're also sneaking about big warehouses, underground tunnels and giant storage rooms where a certain Metal Gear Rex is being stored. Each area has a similar visual undertone, a sort of grey mechanical feel, all the while each feel and look different in their own right. The character models looked great for the time, each main character having their own unique look and personality. The visual details that made each character stand out, from Solid Snake's bandana to Revolver Ocelot's cowboy tash to Liquid Snake's long overcoat, all contributed to making the characters visually different and fresh when you first encounter them. To be honest, you'll be hard pressed to find anything wrong with the visuals in this game. As I'm reviewing this in 2021 and the game was released in 1998, I'm not going to comment on the visual problems that the PS1 brought to most games, like the famous warble effect. That just would be unfair. Nor am I going to mention anything that was limited purely because of the technology of the time. Overall, the game was a visual masterpiece which inspired lots of developers and games thereafter. So visually, Metal Gear Solid from me gets a 9 out of 10.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
So on to the sound, guys. The audio playlist all the way through this game is one that you could listen to and recognise as the Metal Gear Solid soundtrack. Not only does it bring drama and suspense to the visuals, it delivers an unrivaled audio explosion to your ears compared to any other PlayStation game before it. The music itself either was inspired or shaped the music of films, past and future, similar to that of a Michael Bay film like The Rock, starring Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage. That's the bracket in which the music of this game is held up in, that with Hollywood top films. The sound effects are so synonymous with fans even up until today and are still used in many videos on YouTube or other social media platforms like the codec ring or the alert sound when an enemy soldier sees you. The voice acting and script writing is second to none. Every character's voice matches their look. Each word is said and portrayed so flawlessly they draw you in to listen to everything that's being said. From the huskiness of David Hayter, who, by the way, is a legend as Snake, not Kiefer Sutherland's version, to Ottocon's nerdy high-pitched voice, to the Colonel's growly voice. Every scene with vocal interaction is sublime. So in terms of the sound, I give this 8 out of 10. So, moving on to mechanics. Well, this introduced a ton of mechanics never before seen at the time, but I'm going to start off with the basics and standard ones first. You could run, crawl, and have your back to the wall. You can kneel, fire your weapon, switch to first person view mode, although you can only do that while standing still. You had a choice of weapons that are procured throughout the game, like the Soken pistol, the FAMAS assault rifle. Moving on to the Nikita missile launcher, which by the way was remote controlled, to the famous sniper rifle used to take out Sniper Wolf, the PSG-1. These are selected using the trigger buttons to scroll through. You also had various miscellaneous items like the famous cardboard box, to the smokes used to see infrared sensors, to the mine detector, thermal goggles and the key cards used to open various doors throughout each area. The point is, all of these items and weapons were woven into the game, and Kojima made sure each one had a purpose and was fully utilised as part of the story and not just there to beef out the inventory. But those are just the standard mechanics. The real genius ideas are to follow. To start off with, when you have your back to the wall, you can use the knock to gain a guard's attention or distract him, and they even respond with, "Huh? What's that noise?" This completely astounded me with what felt like limitless options to interact with the enemies. Then on to the Psycho Mantis boss fight, where when he states that you haven't saved often, I actually thought he was reading my mind and could see into my bedroom. Coupled with the changing controller ports, because he could read your mind. And to back that up, you couldn't actually kill him if you didn't change your port. I was gobsmacked. Plus the way the screen passed to a dark screen with Hideo in the corner that made you believe your console had broken. Moving on to the interaction with the PAL card to override the detonation of the nuclear warhead that had to be affected using hot and cold temperature. All this interaction really immersed you in the experience. It really brought you into the game. Also, Meryl's codec number that is hinted to you in a conversation with the Colonel. Hinted that it's on the CD, back of the CD case. It actually took me about an hour to suss that one out. And then suddenly you realise, oh yeah, it's on the CD case. And you're astounded. You're like, how does this happen? So all of this interaction just really brought you into the game, and it was never before seen. It was so wow with all these different events. So in terms of mechanics, I give this a 9 out of 10.
Now I want to enjoy the moment.
What's with these?
So on to the gameplay. Right, this one is probably the only category where the game will have a few faults. To start off with, the shooting is so difficult to get to grips with. There's no aiming down the sights. It's literally you've got to face the enemy and press the shoot button. And what the game does, it sort of slowly aims a little bit wide of the target, and then eventually you get some bullets on the actual enemy itself. But you do have to miss a few shots to start with. It never sort of aims directly at the enemy first time. But a lot of this is to do with the camera angle. It has this, see that isometric top-down camera angle is good in some aspects, but not good in others. For example, the shooting, it's not good. But for the sheer sort of exploring and running around the environment, it is good because you have to then go into first-person view mode in order to see where you're going and what's ahead of you. Then there's the back to the wall move where you have to knock on the wall to attract an enemy, which is actually very difficult to pull off, especially with the old PlayStation 1 controllers. Numerous times my finger slid on the D-pad and I ended up slipping into view of the enemy. It was very sensitive. It's sort of, especially if you get too close to the edge, he'll suddenly run off and into view, and you slip straight into the view of the enemy. Then there's the lack of camera control, again going to this isometric top-down camera view, but I think that was technically a limitation of the time, as most games of that era didn't allow you to rotate the camera. I mean, apart from them few petty faults really, the gameplay is extremely solid and fluid, especially when you compare to other games like Siphon Filter and Tomb Raider. I mean, for example, with Tomb Raider and Siphon Filter, when you wanted a turn, it's sort of like a big turning circle. With Metal Gear Solid, was literally flick the D-pad in that direction, it'll automatically go. So there was a lot more fluidity to it, and a lot more sharpness and quickness to the turn circle. So with that being said, I give the gameplay a 7 out of 10.
I'm here, Snake!
So guys, that is the end of my retro review for Metal Gear Solid. Just a few things I want to say though. What I noticed while I was reviewing this and going back to playing the game was that the amount of creative freedom that developers used to have back in the sort of early PlayStation 1 era, the sort of mid to late 90s, possibly the early 2000s, just from a lot of the things I went through on the Metal Gear Solid game, just the creativity that was allowed, the innovation that was allowed. Whereas today you get big companies like Ubisoft, EA Sports that will just follow the same formula, and the developers are allowed no creativity. Today, it's all about numbers. It's all about pleasing investors. It's all about trying to put monetization into it. It's all about not actually creating. There's no creative freedom there, which is now you're getting these monotonous repeat games every single version, every single year almost. Ubisoft with its Far Cry formula, its Assassin's Creed formula, and various other formulas, especially with Ubisoft is one of the big ones. EA Sports, they don't feel no pressure anymore with their FIFA games. They don't really do much improvement, because it's all about pleasing investors with the least money spent possible. And Konami are like that now also. Whereas Konami back then, they actually allowed creative freedom. So you got games like Metal Gear Solid. That creative freedom, and I think the gaming industry is there is still games, but it has, for some reason now, the creative games are done by indie developers. No longer are the big AAA companies doing these big creative games that are just not copy and pasting other ideas, actually creating an idea. So I just think the gaming industry is at risk of losing the creative. I mean, what's the point of calling it art now? Because it isn't art now, because you're told what you can and can't make in a game. So it's no longer is it art. Art, you don't go up to an artist with a paintbrush and say you can't paint that. The whole point is it's a creative freedom, it's an art form. But it isn't an art form anymore, because you're being told what to do by the investors or by the CEOs of each company. So anyway, guys, that's what I pulled away from this. That creative freedom has gone from that era completely. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my retro review. If you do enjoy my content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button right there. And check out my previous video, which was... What was my previous video? I do this so much, I can't remember my previous video. Microsoft Flight Simulator tutorial number 3. I will be doing tutorial number 4, which is final approach and landing. So please take a look at tutorial number 3, which is up on your screens right now. And hope you'll have a good weekend, bank holiday weekend if you're in the UK. Anywhere else, have a good weekend, good week. Love you all. Bye.